We're here at FedScoop's Security Transformation Summit with Renata Spinks, Assistant Director for IC4 at the U.S. Marine Corps. Renata, it's always a pleasure having you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd like to start by asking, what steps has your agency, or your office rather, taken to really help offset and or adjust to the chronic cybersecurity staffing skills shortages that so many agencies are facing?
Such a great question. Definitely hones in on one of my favorite topics, which is people. It's no, like you said, it's no secret that we do have a shortage in cybersecurity. The one thing that the Marine Corps, I think, will continue to foot stomp and take pretty personally is the Commandant's talent management document that came out a few months ago. His talent management for 2030, it outlines not only how we think about people and our Marines, but how we actually manage that talent that is so lacking. Not only is it within the cybersecurity space, but just, you know, understanding the criticality of how everything works within the cyberspace, whether we are enlisting Marines for a tactical environment, such as infantry MOSs, or if we're enlisting Marines such as the comms community. It doesn't matter which MOS, cyber is going to be involved. And complementary to that are the civilians, great minds. Sometimes they're veterans and sometimes they're industry people who just come in to share their knowledge. And so we have to make sure that we are focusing in on the diversity of talent. And that's why Talent Management 2030 is so critical. We invest consistently by training dollars. That means we're putting our money where our mouth is. We are looking at our recruiting command and how they are using technology to recruit and meeting people where they are. During COVID, we were at a standstill. So Zoom was real critical. Google Meet was really critical. And the Marines faced a large challenge in that space. We faced a challenge of how do we take advantage of technology to get in the houses and the rooms of so many people so that we can continue recruiting and then continue the retention piece. Hiring was still occurring, so how did we continue our workforce and making sure that they could still access those human resource systems? Payroll still had to be executed. So that is what we did to address the workforce management piece. And the shortage of cyber skills, partnering with academia is so important. We look at the historically black colleges and universities. We look at the community colleges. There's so many curriculums that are out there right now that people are taking advantage of. And the online learning has probably been one of the most revolutionary things that we can really take advantage of. And then when we're not, you know, perusing for degrees, we're looking for certifications. We're investing in making sure that our Marines can get certified. And I want to be clear, when I say Marines, I always go the extra step to say civilians and active duty, but we're all Marines, right? And so when I say Marines, I mean everybody, even our contractual defense department and the contractors that come in and help us day to day based on federal acquisition regulations. They're our Marines as well. And so we make sure that we are gleaning from lessons learned at the other services and sharing that information, whether that's white papers, whether that's research. We have innovation challenges where we can actually have hands-on experiences with application development. And, you know, there's capture the flag that goes on. So that's the cybersecurity piece. So we're not only just talking about it and creating policy, but we're actually taking action and doing things strictly around how do we grow talent we have within, how do we recruit that talent, and then making sure we have the tools in place through the technologies that we are investing millions and millions of the taxpayers' dollars in to retain that talent and keep up with newer technologies.
Well, that sounds a very enlightened approach. So thank you for laying that out for us. The other question I had for you is, where would you say the U.S. Marine Corps has maybe made the greatest headway over the past year towards adopting the DoD's zero trust strategy and sort of the beginnings of the roadmap now ahead?
Yeah, so we're conscious of the mandates and executive orders But before all that, there were conversations about zero trust. Industry was talking about zero trust from an intel perspective. I spent 3 years at Marfor Cyber. We shared the campus with NSA. We were part of that United States Cyber Command paradigm and construct. And zero trust was a necessity when the world shut down. You know, we had to focus on identities. We had to make sure that no matter where our employees were, if they were not in what we call a SCIF, then they were home, because, you know, the pandemic forced us to be very, very health conscious and restrict ourselves from potentially spreading such a lethal virus. And so we had to focus on identities. We were challenged with instruments, because our workforce went home one day expecting to come back to work the next day or the next 2 or 3 days. Some people were on, you know, leave and things like that. And their instruments, their end user devices were still on their desks. And so we focused on health consciously, you know, making sure our end user devices were equipped with the certificates that were needed. We extended the requirements, worked very closely with the Department of Defense and the personnel office for certificates, and our CAT cards. People's CAT cards were expiring, so working very closely with DISA was so important. So I think as we always say, the technology is going to outpace the policy every time. And I think that's a healthy thing. I think that if we don't have an intestinal fortitude, and if we don't have that intellectual curiosity, we may find ourselves penning documents and mandates that are not valuable and they're unrealistic. So during COVID-19, the way the Marine Corps moved out to the cloud, and the way we were forced to federate identities, moving mailboxes, making sure that we did not violate records management laws. We invested very shortly after that in a service data officer, because that made us realize, yes, we definitely have a critical piece. Whether we were authorized another SES, you know, that was a conversation, but by any means necessary. And so we hired at what we call a highly qualified expert. And that HQE is on board now, and we are approaching data governance, we're approaching data management, tagging, the data taxonomies. What does the Marine need at the speed of need for decision making, but also the joint community? JADC2 is right in our backyard. We focus and work very closely with the joint community. And so the service data officers responsibility is almost as rare as the cybersecurity skills that we just talked about. It's something that the Department of Defense has struggled. I think federal government at large has struggled with data. And so the Commandant and the Assistant Deputy Commandant of Information and the DCI, they all partnered together and said we definitely have to define what this service data officer is going to be doing, and then enable and empower the service data officer. And so now we've gotten to data tagging. We're sharing data with some of the large-scale databases throughout the Department of Defense. And then you heard me talk about innovation challenges. We're also investing in platforms for software development. And most critical to that, after we stabilized is what I'll say. I won't say normalized, because I don't think we'll ever go back to what we thought was normal. But as we approached a stabilized COVID-19 paradigm, and we started to adopt some tools and techniques and procedures to better deal with such a large-scale challenge, we also had to ensure that we focused in on enabling and empowering our employees to take advantage and adopt the technologies that we were pushing out very quickly, by the way. And then at the end of the day, take that feedback from our users and make the experience better, as well as work with industry. So the zero trust journey, I think, is defined by a lot of those lessons learned. And we see it in a lot of the tenets that are already in place. You can't have continuous monitoring. You cannot, it will be, I won't say you can't. It would be very difficult for me to assess your ability to access everything you're trying to access on the network without the data, and cloud computing to make that data storable, as well as the ability for algorithms and machine learning to help do things that just realistically a human cannot do in an efficient and effective manner as quickly as we need to. So that last piece of zero trust to us is, to answer your question on many of the ways that we're addressing that zero trust and that journey, is our common eye is investing in artificial intelligence and machine learning. We definitely have pilots going on throughout the Marine Corps. But again, we're also watching and we're acquiring lessons learned from everything else that the services are doing. By no means is the Marine Corps perfect, and we're definitely not, alone and unafraid. From a deployment perspective, sometimes we're the first ones in. But when it comes to, hey, let's figure out this new technology and how we can provide our warfighters with something a little bit more efficient, effective, and fast and quick, because they're moving pretty quickly, they're moving really fast. And at the end of the day, while operations are here for business settings, and we kind of figured all that out within the unclassified space, our next challenge now that we're really focusing on for zero trust is, how do we achieve zero trust architecture effectively and efficiently, within the cyber readiness space in a classified environment? And so those, we'll take our hats off for achievements in the IL5. We've learned a lot from that perspective. But I think the largest challenge now that we've been posturing ourselves for is how we are getting after, the classified environment. And we've spent the last year investing time, attention, policy writing, acquiring pilots of information or information from pilots, and just setting the expectations of, here's where we are today, here's what our classified environment looks like, here's what that network looks like, and oh, by the way, here's all of the things we have to improve. And just recently the NDAAs was published, and so now we have appropriations and authorization, so all of that matters. And so that's how the Marine Corps is moving towards zero trust. And I would say it is a infinite journey.
Absolutely. Well, Renata Spinks, it's always a pleasure hearing from you, and also about the work and progress that you're making at the U.S. Marine Corps on behalf of the nation. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having us.